Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Boxiest, and today we're going to continue the What If series. What if events had gone differently? And in this What If, we're going to change the history of Cobra Kai. What if the villains of the Karate Kid trilogy teamed up 30 years later? If you haven't seen part 1, I would recommend you go watch it before continuing this one. So in this timeline, Daniel would continue living his life, but he wouldn't be married to Amanda in this timeline. Instead, Daniel would be a handyman, just like Johnny was in the original timeline. So Sam and Anthony would never be born, and he wouldn't own his car dealership, but Daniel would still practice karate during his free time, and he would try to keep the legacy of Mr. Miyagi alive. Those events would carry on. Miguel would still move to the valley in this timeline, and Miguel would still be at the convenience store, but in this timeline, it would be Daniel that would save him. Miguel would thank Daniel, and he would ask him if he could teach him some karate. Daniel would agree, so Daniel would reopen Miyagi-Do in this timeline, and the events of Season 1 would continue. Daniel would know how to market Miyagi-Do, and without any interference, Miyagi-Do would start to get more students, and Miguel would start learning defense. Eli and Dimitri would join in this timeline. Word would spread about Miyagi-Do, and eventually Kreese would find out. Kreese would get mad, knowing that Mr. Miyagi's memory still lived on, and that Cobra Kai's legacy and the way the fist had to end. So Kreese would want to take down Daniel, and Mr. Miyagi's legacy once and for all. So much like in the original timeline, Kreese would still go get Terry Silver, and Terry would be surprised to see him after all these years, and he would remind Terry that they needed to finish what they started, that they needed to bring back Cobra Kai in the way of the fist. And at first, Terry would be against it, but he would remember the promise he had made to Kreese in Vietnam, so Terry would agree to help. But since they were bringing back Cobra Kai and the way of the fist, and taking down Miyagi-Do once and for all, Terry would decide that they needed help, so Terry would make a phone call, and Kreese would get the idea to get Johnny, so Kreese would eventually track down Johnny, and in this timeline, Johnny's life would be slightly better than it was in the original timeline, and Johnny would be surprised to see Kreese after all these years. Kreese would apologize to Johnny for how things ended between them, and he would offer Johnny a chance to bring back Cobra Kai and take back what LaRusso had taken from them 30 years ago. And at first, Johnny would be hesitant, but much like in the original timeline, Kreese would manipulate Johnny, and those events would carry on. Sensei Kim Dayun and her senseis would arrive in the valley, and Kreese and Terry would be happy to see them. Terry would tell Sensei Kim that this was their chance to bring her grandfather's legacy to America. Sensei Kim would be happy to hear this. Terry would realize that they needed to know Miyagi-Do in order to defeat Daniel, and this is when Terry would remember Chosen. So Terry would track Chosen down, and he would go to Okinawa. Chosen would be surprised to see Terry Silver after all these years, and Terry would tell him about Miyagi-Do and their plan to take it down. And in this timeline, Chosen will still see Mr. Miyagi as a coward, even after all these years. He would be angry that the Miyagi legacy still lived on, and he would want to finish what his uncle started all those years ago, so Chosen would agree to help Terry. And when they get back to the US, Terry would realize that they still needed muscle, and he would decide to track down Mike Barnes. And in this timeline, since Mike Barnes was never disgraced from karate, he would have continued winning tournaments and eventually become a karate master and champion of the Saikai Taikai. Mike would be surprised to see Terry Silver after all these years. Terry Silver would tell Mike Barnes about their plan, and he would offer him millions to join them. Since Mike and Terry didn't end on bad terms, Mike would accept Terry Silver's offer, so Mike would join them in this timeline, and those events would carry on. Daniel would continue training his students, and this is when Terry and the rest of the senseis would show up, and Daniel would be surprised and terrified to see them. And that is where I'm going to end part 2. Thank you guys for watching. What do you guys think would have happened if the Karate Kid villains teamed up 30 years later? Let me know in the comments below. YouTube lets me know that the majority of you are not subscribed, so if you guys could subscribe, that would be much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And I'll see you guys next time.